The Clintar, known as Venom, has been around since the 1980s, first being introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man number 252. It bonded to Spider-Man after the miniseries Secret Wars. It restored Spider-Man and increased his spider abilities, though it has affected Spider-Man's personality, causing a rift between his friends and loved ones. So he got rid of it and it bonded to Eddie Brock, turning him into Venom and becoming one of Spider-Man's worst enemies. But what if Spider-Man never got rid of the suit? Luckily, there's a story that tells it all, and we will talk about it. Spider-Man, the Spider Shadow. Hit it! Spider-Man the Spider Shadow is a 5-part miniseries that was published by Marvel Comics that ran from April 14th, 2021 to August 11, 2021 with 5 issues. It was written by Chip Zdarsky. He is best known for his work through other comics such as Sex Criminals, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Daredevil, Howard the Duck, and Jughead. Heavy spoilers if you have not read this yet, because in my opinion, this story is something else. So let's get into Spider-Man The comic begins with a nightmare that Peter Parker is having, realizing that he's doing his best, but his loved ones tell him that he's not. Peter wakes up and says that the nightmares are getting worse. His Aunt May has not been talking to him since he dropped out of school. He's been messing around with Mary Jane and Black Cat. Feeling that he can't go back to sleep, he suits up in the alien costume to get some air. He feels the only easy thing in his life right now is the alien suit that doesn't need to go into laundry after one night of fighting crime. Unlimited webbing that responds to his thoughts and it can mimic other clothing. But he does miss his classic look. Peter stops a mugging, but he noticed that he was getting a little more aggressive. As Peter tries to call it a night, he hears a voice telling him no. He has another nightmare later that night, questioning Peter if he's the Spider or Peter Parker. As Peter screams out, Mary Jane comes to comfort him, but he accidentally shoves her, promptly waking him up. She wanted to apologize from the previous night walking out on him. She says that it's hard accepting his double life of being Spider-Man. She sees that things are going bad for Peter by him not sleeping, and he has a dark demeanor to himself, questioning the nature of the alien suit. However, Peter says he will figure it out. Later, Peter attempts to go visit Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic, to find out the nature of the alien suit. As he approached the Baxter building, his powers and webbing stop working for some odd reason. Peter's spider sense goes off and it was the Hobgoblin attacking. Peter says that the Goblin has given him trouble for quite some time now and needs to end the fight quickly. As Peter hits the Hobgoblin, he loses his grip on one of his bombs and explodes, pushing Peter into a glass building. The Hobgoblin taunts Peter by saying that he will miss him once he's killed him, but Peter takes him by surprise by smashing a car into the back of him and is knocked out. Peter is now fed up with the Hobgoblin and he starts to grab him and smacks him around a bit. He hears a voice in his head again telling Peter to kill the Hobgoblin. Peter instead takes off the Hobgoblin's mask, revealing his identity, Roderick Kingsley. Roderick tells Peter that he just wanted power. Peter gets angry and punches Roderick repeatedly while the voice in his head tells him to scare Roderick. To spread fear, instead of giving Roderick to the police, Peter lets him go to spread the word that Spider-Man is now playing for keeps, meaning next time he will kill him. That evening, Peter meets with Black Cat and told her what happened with Hobgoblin. She says that it sounds good and also wonders what's bothering him. Peter says that he's angry at the world, at all the bad guys. Black Cat confronts Peter and tells him that he may have done the right thing by scaring the criminals. The next day, Peter visits Reed Richards at the Baxter building. Reed is just as eager to find out more about the suit. Peter says that the suit feels good as he wears it, but when he takes it off, he feels bad. As Peter gets into the machine so that Reed can run tests, Peter took an opportunity to get some sleep. However, he had another nightmare, seeing his Aunt May beg for him to help her and everyone else. Aunt May then tells Peter that he has to hurt people to save people. Peter doesn't want to as the alien suit fully takes over. Peter wakes up and shocked as Reed confronts him, telling Peter that he's reacting to the suit's thoughts. It is bonding to Peter's physically and mentally, but it's not an advanced material, it's more of a symbiote. Peter figured that since the suit is alive, it is somehow has to be necessary. Reed wants the symbiote to be removed immediately to further examine it. Peter doesn't feel that it's necessary because he actually feels clear, and since the suit is alive, it has rights just as much as he. Reed begs for Peter to stay as he reaches his hand out, but Peter accidentally hurts Reed. He feels that since he knows more about the suit, his visit has concluded and leaves. Peter started to feel bad about what happened with Reed. Needing someone to talk to, he goes and sees Aunt May, despite her being upset that he dropped out of high school. But unknown to him, Peter was followed by Hobgoblin. Peter talks with Aunt May, saying that he needs her help. Aunt May apologizes that she shunned him out and felt like he was living up to his potential. Peter was going to reveal he's Spider-Man until his spider sense goes off and the wall behind him explodes, setting the house on fire. It was the Hobgoblin leveling the playing field, not knowing Peter's identity. Peter suits up and punches Hobgoblin outside and the two fight. As Peter was getting his hits in, he forgot that Aunt May was in the fire. As he tried to go in, the suit holds him back, saying that the fire will kill them. Peter begs the suit, but it said it cannot, and the explosion happens, killing Aunt May inside. The suit apologizes, but he turned Peter's attention to the Hobgoblin, blaming him. The Hobgoblin tries to flee, but Peter webs him up. The Hobgoblin looks up and sees Peter transform into a more monster-like form. As he blames himself for Aunt May's death, he finally realized what he needed to do. He used his newfound power to kill the Hobgoblin, leaving him webbed up on a light pole. A short time after, Peter is feeling the shame after killing Hobgoblin. The symbiote doesn't know what shame is, but if people know what shame is, they wouldn't do wrong. Peter sees a newspaper article of the Daily Bugle calling him a murderer. The Bugle had been slandering Spider-Man's name for years, so now he thinks putting fear upon people is the right thing to do. We are joined by Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime. He said he only tolerated superheroes because of their code not to kill, but since Spider-Man has become unhinged, he decided to put out a call. At the Bugle, the editor-in-chief, J. Jonah Jameson, always thought Spider-Man was a criminal, and what happened to Hobgoblin proved his point. As Jonah went to his office, Peter breaks in and pins Jonah to the wall. He tells Jonah that he doesn't care anymore about what he says because all he's ever done was to help people. He breaks Jonah's hands and he's threatened him not to print any more words about him as he leaves. Several days have passed. Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, searches the city for Peter. He tells Reed that rumors are going around that Peter was threatening people. Reed calculated that Peter is running out of time until the symbiote bonds to him permanently. Meanwhile, Mary Jane visits Peter and she sees him resting as the suit is holding him up. Peter says that we've been busy, and Mary Jane immediately questions it. Mary Jane wants to know what everyone says is true. Peter says that he could have saved Aunt May rather than dealing with Hobgoblin, answering Mary Jane's question. Feeling that he has the power to make decisions of whether who lives or dies as he leaves from out his window. Peter swings around as he has a conversation with the symbiote. The symbiote justifies what they did and others won't understand. The conversation is cut short and when he's attacked by Shocker. The Shocker wasn't alone, also Scorpion attacked. Peter wasn't having it and killed Scorpion by using the symbiote to suffocate him. Shocker couldn't believe his eyes that Fisk was right. That night while Fisk was reading, Peter shows up with what was left of Shocker and Scorpion. Fisk talks stating when the Hobgoblin was murdered he figured out Peter's identity. As Fisk tried to play mind games with Peter, Peter punches Fisk's face in, presumably killing him. Other villains like Doc Ock, Mysterio, Kraven the Hunter, Electro, and Rhino, feeling that they are next. Kraven wants to come up with a plan. Doc Ock reveals that the only person that had contact with the new Spider-Man was J. Jonah Jameson. Feeling that for years he tried to warn people about Spider-Man, but didn't want to listen. They all agree that he must be stopped. As Kraven draws up plans, Doc Ock is then attacked by one of his henchmen, but it wasn't one of his henchmen. It was Eddie Brock, telling Doc Ock that killing Spider-Man is his job. Jonah meets up with the other villains as they wait for Doc Ock, but he didn't show up. It was Eddie Brock with Doc Ock's tentacles. Jonah recognizes that he was a reporter from the Globe that was fired due to Spider-Man ruining his life. It seems that the rest didn't have a problem with that. Even Rhino stated that he didn't like Otto because Otto always looked down on him. Meanwhile, Reed and some other heroes go on the hunt for Peter as he killed more of his supervillains. Reed then blames himself for not doing anything when he had the chance. Meanwhile, Peter tortured and killed the Beetle to snuff out the rest of the villains. Seems now that he's going out of his way to find and kill them all. Damn. Just damn. As Eddie and the others wait for Peter, Jonah asks why Eddie wants revenge. Eddie says that Spider-Man ruined his life. Jonah then says that Eddie lied in the story accusing a man of being the Sin Eater and Spider-Man caught the real killer. The conversation is cut short when Jonah hears something and he stumbles upon the Beetle's body, strung up by spiderwebs. Mysterio puts his plan into motion and the others had put on goggles so they can see reality while Peter sees an illusion. There was no sight of Peter, but Kraven figured out that Peter was on the ground. Peter comes up off of the ground and kills Mysterio. Rhino tries to ram Peter but kills him by punching the horn off his suit. Eddie goes in and shouts at Peter for ruining his life. Peter says he doesn't even know who the hell he is and knocks Eddie out. He then kills Electro by suffocating him. However, he sees fire from behind him, showing Kraven his fear of fire. Jonah surprised Peter with a super suit of his own and lured him into the burning barn. Kraven traps Peter with a net, holding him in the barn long enough to kill him. Jonah looks at Peter as the fire was killing him. However, the normal Peter cries out to Jonah for help. Kraven heads into the barn, but it exploded. He cried out for Jonah to see if he was still alive, but fortunately, he was, and he had Peter in his arms without the symbiote. Jonah says that it's over, but Kraven wants to kill Peter. Jonah stops him by knocking Kraven out. Peter could remember all the murders that he committed while under the influence of the symbiote. Jonah knows that it wasn't Peter, and it was the symbiote's doing, and saying that it's gone forever, but Peter doesn't think so. Meanwhile, Mary Jane and Black Cat search high and low for Peter, even asking the supervillains that are left. Mary Jane hears the sound of a door and is Jonah with Peter begging to give them some room. Peter tries to apologize to them, but there's no time for that, as Black Cat says that in the event of Fisk's death, he reveals Peter's identity as Spider-Man to the world, and the cops have surrounded Peter's apartment. Meanwhile, the symbiote is at the Baxter building and had took over Reed's body, and he uses intelligence to make more symbiotes. Jonah wants to tell the cops that it wasn't Peter's fault, but the cops know that Spider-Man is a murderer. Peter comes out with his old suit saying that he can feel the symbiote still out there and he needs to find it. Peter wants to get Mary Jane and Jonah home safe until this whole thing blows over, but Mary Jane says that she's not seeing this one out as they swing towards the Baxter building, crowded by a symbiote-like shield. Outside the building, the other heroes assemble. Iron Man scans the building trying to figure out who or what the symbiote wants. Peter shows up and says that it's after him. Johnny Storm blames Peter for what's happening. Sue Storm gets in the middle and tells that there's no time for blame. Peter says that he can feel the symbiote calling to him and wants him to come in, but Captain America doesn't want to get a hold of Peter again, forbidding it. Peter unmasks himself and tells Captain America that he promises that he will not let the symbiote take control of him again. Captain America agrees and comes up with a plan to get Peter in the building while also getting innocents out. The symbiote opens up to Peter. As he goes in, Mary Jane and Johnny follow. They see that the people are dying in the trance from the symbiote, but they are indeed alive. Reed's lab is on the 34th floor, so Peter and Johnny went up a broken elevator to get to it. As they were making their way up, they are then attacked by Ben Grimm. Peter told Johnny to keep going. It was now time for Peter to decide that now is not the time to pull his punches, drop the jokes, and get angry. Peter and Ben go back and forth. Peter still doesn't feel full strength, but he manages to web Ben out of the building so that the other heroes can subdue him. Peter contacts Johnny saying that he's outside the lab, however the communications are fried. Johnny confronts the symbiote, revealing his plan to save everyone by using Reed's intelligence to make more of it. Johnny fires a blast at the symbiote, but he tells him even though it doesn't like fire, its children won't have such weaknesses. The symbiote releases the children, affecting everyone including the other heroes. Peter contacts Johnny saying that the other heroes are coming and need to get Mary Jane to safety. Mary Jane shoots the symbiote as it recognizes her, saying that Peter's love for her falters his judgment and she's nothing but an obstacle. Johnny grabs Mary Jane and flies up out of the building, but the other heroes are chasing them down, demanding Johnny to give up Mary Jane. Peter goes to Reed's lab to try to figure out a way to stop the symbiote and its offspring. Peter instructs Johnny to come back to the building while losing the symbiotes to buy some time. Sue helps out to buy time, but is caught off guard by the symbiote. Peter climbs out of the building and is confronted by the symbiote. The symbiote taunts Peter on how strong it became, and Peter won't be able to fight it. Peter knows this and he won't fight it. He said he will allow it to take control of him again if he lets Mary Jane and release the other heroes. The symbiote agreed, but it says that Reed is too smart and can't permit him to stop them once again. So he fatally wounds Reed and throws him off the building. Peter goes back into the Baxter building as the symbiote follows. The symbiote was sure that nothing in the lab can be used against it. As it consumes Peter, the symbiote felt something was wrong and that it wasn't Peter, but it was Johnny, as Peter with the image inducer, and flamed on, causing an explosion. The real Peter and Mary Jane witnessed the explosion on the side of the roof, thanking Johnny. As the other heroes were liberated from the symbiote, the Fantastic Four suffered the loss of Reed. Sometime later, Jonah visits Eddie in the hospital, telling him to let the idea of revenge go. It will be hard, but it will get better over time. As Jonah leaves, he tells him that he will testify on Eddie's behalf on the murder of Doc Ock, stating that he's not alone in this. Peter turned himself in to face trial. Due to the testimonies of the other heroes that were under the control of the symbiote, Peter was found not guilty. Peter and Mary Jane went to his aunt and uncle's grave. Peter feels horrible and happy at the same time and wonders how that was possible. Mary Jane tells Peter that he has done his best and he needs to push past his guilt, but Peter questions how he can ever be Spider-Man again after what happened. Sue shows up and asks to talk to Peter alone. Peter has been leaving messages to talk about what happened, but Sue says that Reed's death wasn't his fault. She told Peter how guilty Reed used to be about how he and the others got their powers. Instead, he turns that guilt into a positive. She takes out a Fantastic Four badge and hands it to Peter, stating that they will move through this tragedy together. The comic ends as Peter became the new member of the Fantastic Four. In the epilogue, we find out Fisk is alive and angry for Peter not paying for his crimes. One of his employees, Wesley, says that he had wonderful news from the lab and Fisk should focus on his health. Fisk doesn't care about his health and wants nothing more than destroy Peter. Wesley assured Fisk that he can have his health and destroy Peter, as Fisk is shown a test tube of the survived symbiote. Man, this was a fun read. One choice can change everything, making a new divergent reality from the one we knew. It looks like Peter's choice to keep the symbiote must have expanded upon years, judging upon his facial hair and height, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders and need to save everyone. Since then, he stopped taking slander from the Bugle and tortured Jonah. His rogues gallery had dwindled to zero once he had killed the Hobgoblin. He showed no mercy to them, even went out of his way to hunt them down. By the time Jonah had Peter pinned down and the fire was weakening the symbiote, Peter cries out for help, meaning that he wasn't in control the whole time. I thought at first that he was two Tommy, Mary Jane, and Black Cat, but I read that panel out of context. My bad. He could have just not known who or what he wanted in a relationship. By the end, he has been exonerated by his crimes while under the control by the symbiote. Now, even though he was controlled, he still has to live with the fact that he did those things. But now with his identity out, he doesn't have to wear his costume anymore and became the newest member of the Fantastic Four, honoring Reed's memory. The symbiote was in love with Peter in a sick, twisted way. It wanted to help Peter save innocent at all costs, even when as far as making offspring of itself, creating an Avengers level threat. The main obstacle that were in his way were Mary Jane and Reed. The symbiote felt that Peter was in love with Mary Jane. Reed was too smart and would have figured out a way to destroy it. So killing Reed was his last act of deception until his weakness was exploited by Johnny. I'm surprised that in this story, its other weakness was exploited as well, like intense sonic waves, an antidote that can kill symbiotes created by Iron Man in the main 616 universe. However, the symbiote's offspring didn't have any such weakness. Conveniently, they were all connected to the heart of the main symbiote, so when it died, so did its children. I wonder what would have happened if the offspring would have reproduced itself. It may be possible since one of the symbiotes survived and now Fisk has it and it will be that universe's Venom. I would love to see a story like that, Fisk becoming the new Venom. Luckily, there is a story out there like that, and that's Spider-Man 100th Anniversary Special, Spider-Man #1, which I plan on reading once I upload this video and find it. Judging by the scans I see online, it looks pretty good. But that's all for today. If there's a comic book, TV show, video game, anime, special video idea, or movie that you want me to do a video for, let me know in the comments. Like always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you all next time.